Okay, so I think we're about ready to kick off. So today we have Scott Lyons and Joshua Marpet from Red Lion, who are going to be discussing digital hygiene and how it's fundamental for our businesses. So they're going to talk about digital hygiene, how digital hygiene should integrate with all of your businesses, risk management activities, and how the fundamentals of cybersecurity will give you a real advantage. So we have plenty of time for questions at the end. If they could go through the Q&A at the bottom, that would be great, and we'll get to them. And Scott and Joshua, over to you.
Thank you so much, Holly.
Thank you.
Scott, do you want to run the presentation? Or do you want me to? I honestly, we didn't figure that out ahead of time.
It is what it is. Josh, we've been involved in these presentations now for a minute, and we've had a lot of really great presenters. We've got big shoes to fill, it's Thanksgiving here in the US, right? Which means most of the US people are like, we're not coming to work, we're not going to watch a webinar, I don't care who's presenting. But we figured instead of watching a parade with with people, we'd come and give you guys a presentation, right? So we want to thank everybody for coming and joining us. Again, I'm Scott, that's Josh, and we're going to get on to this presentation. You ready, Josh?
Sounds like a plan. Go for it.
All right. So the presentation that we're giving you today is that digital hygiene is the fundamentals, right? We have a lot of drivers that have pushed us into talking about digital hygiene and how doing the fundamentals is most key in most organizations, because people lose sight of it. You're in the weeds, you're working all the time. You don't really get a chance to sit back and say, am I doing the fundamentals, right? So for today's presentation, we've got a little bit of an agenda, right? And we're going to be going over who we are, why we're here, why should you care, right? And basically what's next, right? So Josh, do you want to go first?
Sure. Hi, Josh Marpet, co-chief vision officer of Red Lion, along with Scott, my partner in crime over here. You can read, so I'm not going to read everything to you, but I've been around the block more than once. I was at the Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia as a senior information security expert. I'm an ex-cop or constable. I'm an ex-fireman. I swore to my wife that when I get retired, I'm going to go become an EMT or an emergency medical technician, just so I can have the trifecta of first responder. She thinks I'm joking. I'm not. Done just about everything you can imagine in terms of information security, from forensics to pen testing to everything. And it's fascinating seeing all the different mindsets. And with that kind of breadth of vision, we're able to do presentations like this about sort of the entire industry. Scott, yours.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. We've been in this industry for a very, very long time, and a lot of the time has been spent towards the hacker community. So Josh runs B-Sites Delaware. I'm a goon at DEF CON. DEF CON, if you don't know what it is, go check it out, defcon.org. It's the annual gathering of hackers in Vegas. Happens usually during dead summertime, like dead center of summer. We are both co-hosts on a little podcast called Security and Compliance Weekly, and giving it a shameless plug, you can find that at securityweekly.com/live, Tuesdays at noon Eastern. If security and compliance are what you're up to, please come check us out. We have a lot of guests on that have a lot of information about security and compliance. Both Josh and I are Misty certified trainers. So we do a lot of training. We do a lot of Zoom calls, a lot of video calls, a lot of outreach in the security community. Both Josh and I do. We are patent pending for a blockchain patent. I do hold certifications. I won't say what. And with that being said, let's move on. So Red Lion, right? Red Lion has been around since 2017. We are a very small team that does very big things for very large companies, right? Either it's penetration testing, or it's compliance, or it's engineering, something along those levels. We normally do, from hedge funds to healthcare to law firms to retail. We help a lot of companies understand that they're not doing the fundamentals, right? So with that being said, why are we here? Right? Well, we believe that digital hygiene is the fundamentals, right? Whether it's patch management, vuln management, configure management, it's all fundamentals, right? Are you doing the basics to help your company survive and move forward into unknown waters of business, right? But let's talk about those fundamentals for a second. Josh, I'm going to throw it to you at this point.
Oh, sure. Fine. No problem. Look, the ideas are pretty simple. If you've got a lot of different activities under control, well, those are the fundamentals. And the problem is that 10 years ago, 20 years ago, these were all kind of really cool and new. Patch management, vuln management, asset management, threat analysis, all these different things in this box here. These days, those are just sort of table stakes. Those are basic blocking and tackling, as we call it. That's that type of activity. Those activities, those things, those functions are all supposed to be, well, of course you do those. You don't? What's wrong with you type of things. And the problem is that there's a lot of companies out there that still don't have these under control. And if you are out there listening and going, well, we handle all of them, I challenge you. And I mean this sincerely. And I don't mean it in a bad way. I challenge you to go take a look. Take a look at just your assets. Let's start there. Because honestly, asset management is one of the fundamentals of everything. If you don't know what you're protecting, how are you supposed to protect it? Go run an asset scan on your network. I guarantee you, because I've never, ever, ever seen a company that didn't, you'll find things you didn't know you had. We've walked into Fortune 1000 companies and said, all right, how many endpoints do you have? Networking devices, servers, workstations, whatever. And they've gone, 800. And we go, okay, then we'll check. They go, what do you mean you're going to check? We're going to check. And we run an asset discovery scan and we come up with 1,200. We're like, well, where are these extra 400 from? I mean, sometimes it's the employees' phones that they've hooked onto the Wi-Fi for their Spotify fix. Okay, cool. That's fine. That's 100 of them. But what about these extra 300? And they're like, we don't know. Okay, maybe we should sit down and talk about it. And it turns out that there's a shadow IT problem. It turns out that there's a test environment that they didn't even know existed. And so they're not patching it. They're not managing it. They're not handling it. Effectively, in any size of company, in any kind of company, we've run across significant amounts of these fundamentals that we think they're handling them. They're actually not. And it's a problem. So we wanted to talk about how these things happen and what you can do about it. Scott?
So blocking and tackling versus table stakes, right? If we go back to the last slide, right? You notice down here we're talking about blocking and tackling versus the table stakes, right? Blocking and tackling, right? You must be at least this tall to ride this ride, right? To do business these days, you have to be up to standards, right? Basic and blocking and tackling is what you need to get to that level of table stakes.
And
right?
remember,
Go ahead, Josh.
And remember that it's not just, oh, we're only a 7-person company. What do we care? Yeah, but it's not just you. It's also the companies you integrate with, the companies you partner with. You're a supplier to some and a customer to others. And so it's the entire value chain, your supply chain, that matters in terms of the blocking and tackling the table stakes. It matters to your customers, it matters to your suppliers, and it should matter to you about all of these different things. So these kinds of activities, these fundamentals, as we call them, are important to you and to your customers and important to you and your suppliers, your entire value chain. And as a matter of fact, in NIST CSF, they added something in version 1.1, which was supply chain risk management. If you're not managing the supply chain risk, you're a part of the supply chain risk. Next slide.
Yeah. Well, speaking about this, like how many times have we heard of breaches, Josh, where attackers are going after third-party suppliers to get into a business?
Target. I'm sorry, what?
Yeah.
And
well, it's not just that. Like there's a story out there of a casino getting popped because of a fish tank.
Well, that was actually an internal, because that was their internal department. No, was it? It might have been a supplier that's like
was
sort
a supplier.
of their fish tank supplier. I can't believe I'm saying this, but they're exotic fish handling company, supplier, whatever. I don't know what they call them. They're aquarium
vendor.
management
Yeah.
company, very important, who put in an IoT enabled fish tank thermometer, and it was hooked up to the Wi-Fi, and it also had an app with a default password that they didn't change. Oops.
Yeah.
So details.
All right, ready?
Yep.
So how do the fundamentals apply? Okay. Earlier, you heard us talking about config management, patch management, asset management, training management, right? But realistically, when you break them down into their most key components, right? What do each of these address, right? Configuration management, handling divergence, right? The handling divergence part is very important, right? What you're really looking for is what are people installing, what are people using, what are people doing that are away from the configuration baseline, right, Josh?
It helps if I unmute. It's an amazing concept. Okay. With all of these different pieces, config management, patch management, vuln management, asset management, all of these, it's incredibly important to keep track of what's going on in your environment. How far are you diverging from your gold standard for config management? Are you keeping everything up to date for patch management, and so on and so forth? I'm not going to read.
Do you even have a gold standard, right?
Uh,
A lot of companies, I understand that the fundamentals, as you grow, you can do more fundamentals, right? In a business, right? Like configuration management and the gold standard. What are you deploying to every single device across the network, right? Whether it's a server, whether it's a desktop, a laptop, a phone, right? How are you doing your MDM, your mobile device management, right? And then
And
from
also-
there, inside of the, go ahead, Josh.
And also, by the way, this is how you protect against ransomware. I live in Delaware in the U.S., and the county or parish or province next to me, Delaware County in Pennsylvania. Yes, there's a Delaware County in Pennsylvania right next to Delaware. It's annoying, let me tell you. Their government just got ransomwared. And so they're paying a $500,000 fine, I think. Well, they've been asked for a $500,000 fine. And if you do proper config management, it also includes this thing called backups. I know, crazy thought. You do your backups properly and you don't have to pay those ransoms. Weird. A lot of this is part of security as well as part of straight up IT. I'll be honest, my personal belief is that 80% of security is just good IT, good systems administration and management. But the point is that each of these systems that we're talking about here, config, patch, vuln, asset, et cetera, it's very important that these be done. If they're not done, you're not handling your business properly. And actually, this is not the business of your business. This is the support structures of your business.
Right.
Okay.
So we have a question from Aaron. Can external entities, i.e. Us, be effective custodians for those types of management processes?
Yeah, of course. Sorry, let me explain. Right now, I bet half a dozen of you, a dozen of you, half of you have some of your information in a cloud system. Whether you use Google Drive because you're a G Suite enabled customer, and so you're asking them to manage your configuration of your email boxes and your storage systems and your SAN, because I mean, let's be honest, after a while you live in email and document storage. So your G Drive and your Gmail is where you live, if you will, where a lot of your information is kept. We trust them that they're doing version controlled, nearline storage, so it can't be ransomware, et cetera. We trust that they're handling availability. We trust that they're doing that. So Google becomes a custodian of some of those processes. There are ways to build small virtualized companies using only cloud services, other than a laptop in front of you, if you know what I mean, and maybe the wireless connection to the internet. But those virtualized companies use those third-party cloud services to be the custodians of some of those pieces. In a larger enterprise, it becomes more difficult. For 5 people or 10 people, I can, these are great questions. For 5 people or 10 people, I can depend on Dell or Apple or whatever, because I buy the same model of MacBook every time, and we use the same programs. When you get bigger, you really need to have an internal IT team deploying an image to these workstations, to these servers, to these whatevers. Okay?
Well, it's either an internal IT team or you're hiring a managed service provider that you can trust that
very, very well
shows you beyond the shadow of a doubt that they know how to support you and your business and ultimately what you're selling.
Aaron, I hope
Right.
that answered your questions. Please throw a yes or
Yeah,
no.
we've got
there.
another question here from Cedric. Does cyber hygiene management and oversight begin at the resource procurement or acquisition stage?
No, it begins far before that. When
Mhm.
you start a business, you have to think about cyber hygiene or digital hygiene or the fundamentals, whatever you want to talk about. We're actually, Red Lion is actually building a product right now, and it's fascinating. Uh, Thank you, Aaron. Well said. I'm not going to repeat that on air. Um, so, Cedric, when you start a business, like I said, we're building a product right now. I'm astounded by how much of the work of building a product is actually the support around the product, the billing processes, which we're using third parties for, the sales process, which we've got a CRM, it's a third party CRM for, the fulfillment process, all the different processes around a business are almost harder than building the product itself.
Mhm.
And for that to matter, all of these things have to be codified, formalized, written down. All of these things have to be done in a proper process-based way. And that's part of that cyber hygiene. Okay. Some of it is just business hygiene, if you know what I mean, not really cyber hygiene, but a lot of it is sort of cyber management, cyber hygiene, doing the fundamentals properly. So we have to do all of these different pieces in ways that matter. Now, that rolls right into the resource procurement. For example, in the budget that we built for this product, we have the people coming in and the salaries that they're going to be making. We have the amount of money we're going to be spending on Office 365 for them, or M365, because we're going to do Microsoft 365 for the hardware that we're buying them, all of these different pieces, and we're making it reproducible. We're making it standardized. We're making it so that we're building out, again, that process, that fundamental based of do it the right way the first time and keep doing it the right way and document the heck out of it.
You know,
Okay?
I'm gonna go out on a limb here, Josh, and I'm gonna say that there are two major issues, right? When dealing with process inside of the business, right? The first, and I'm going to jump right back into the slide here in just a hot second. The first is identification that it is time to build a process, right?
That's a good one. I like
the
that.
the first challenge is the identification, right? You don't know that you need a process until it's either too late or you're sitting back saying that we are a process driven organization, right? Now, it being too late, like you'll have some challenges to overcome, and this brings me to the second point, right? You'll have some challenges to overcome, and the big challenge right here is data custodians,
Yeah, you
right?
know, this goes back to our compliance background, Scott. I mean, remember we talked
Mhm.
about this. So there's a lot of different certifications, compliance standards and such out there. And one of them is called the SOC 2. It's from the AICPA, the American Institute of Certified Public
Wait. You
Accountants.
said SOC 2?
Yeah, well, that's because you have one for each foot. I'm sorry, I
Oh,
couldn't
okay.
resist.
Well, there is a SOC 1 and a SOC and what is it? SOC 2 type 1 and a SOC 2 type 2.
Right. So for all 4 feet. No,
Yes, all 4
I'm
feet.
sorry, I couldn't resist. It's a horrible joke. I'm not a comedian, forgive me, okay? But no, what it is that the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants has these standards for data centers and data holding facilities, if you will. And the SOC stands for the bloody hell, I can't think of it. But the SOC 2 is effectively what replaced the SAS 70. If you remember that, it basically says that your data center is holding and managing your data in a way that is reproducible, that follows the trust principles, that handles it properly. Okay. And what's interesting is we get a lot of clients that, or potential clients that walk in saying, "Hey, I'm in a SOC 2 certified data center. I'm done, right? I'm SOC 2 certified." No. Like, what do you mean? I'm in a SOC 2 certified data center. We're like, yeah, they're handling the data center portion of the SOC 2. You've got to handle the data custodian part of the SOC 2. You are responsible for your own data and how you are processing that data. And there are trust principles and pieces of the SOC 2 that matter for that. What I'm trying to come across here with is that each of these management pieces, I can go to a third party and have them run it for me, but I'm still the custodian of my data. I'm still the custodian of my piece of that process, if you will. And you have to know who's responsible for these things. We build RACI charts like crazy for this stuff. Okay.
Mhm.
If you're not familiar with RACI charts, they're charts that show who is responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed for all of these activities. And it might be that the group responsible is Google for G Suite or whatever. Okay. But who's accountable is the person here at the company that is in charge of that relationship. Okay. There has to be an accountable person for every piece of these fundamentals. Sorry, we went way off track on that one.
That's okay.
But
In the chat, actually, what I'm doing is I'm throwing up a link to Imperva, right? Imperva.com. Imperva's really done a great job at being able to define SOC 2 compliance, what it is, why you need it, so on and so forth, right? Whenever you're dealing with anything SOC and AICPA, you have to understand that SOC 1 is for finance, SOC 2 is for tech, and SOC 3, which is coming out here very shortly, if it's not out already, deals with the cloud, right? So with that being said,
SOC 3 is actually the smaller piece that you give to your clients. I think there's a new one, but I don't think it's SOC 3. I think they renamed it differently, but that's fine. Doesn't matter. So by the way,
you
just
still need
disclaimer, we're not
go ahead.
affiliated with Imperva in any way. It
No.
just happens to be a very good piece of resource for you guys.
Yeah.
All right. Should we go to the next slide?
Yeah, but even with compliance, a data custodian for compliance must be identified as well. Right?
Oh, absolutely.
So next slide, let's move on, right? Risk management and digital hygiene meet at the eye of compliance, right? Josh, you want to talk about this?
We couldn't resist the eye of Sauron. I'm sorry, it had to be there. It was like, this is the right place for it. So effectively, digital hygiene is the basis for a lot of proper compliance. And compliance and risk management are cousins, if you will. They're symbiotic. In a very bad place, they're parasitic on each other, but they should be symbiotic. Effectively, compliance and risk management and digital hygiene should all be dancing together to the same tune. If we are properly handling our data, our machines, our configurations, our change, all of the pieces of our industry and our vertical and our enterprise, we are meeting compliance standards. Our risk management should be, oh, thank God we're doing okay. You know, the risk management people should say, you have lowered your risk significantly because you're doing things properly, reproducibly, process-based, compliant. Our cyber insurance costs are going to go down through the floor because we are handling risk properly. Our risk can be priced lower. And because this means that we can quantize it, we can measure it, we can metric our risk. And I don't like any of those words, to be honest with you. Measuring, okay, but it's really not sexy.
Well, when we're dealing with companies right here, like what you're talking about right now is the biggest issue that we see across the board with most businesses, right? Because they don't have a very clear set methodology or motivation to do either of these tasks when it comes to risk.
Well, they don't. When you have auto insurance, your auto insurance costs are based on how many accidents and speeding tickets and moving violations you've had. We have actuarial tables. Can't speak, sorry. Actuarial tables that show how much of a risk you are based on your age, your gender, your various different bits and pieces of your background. Okay. We do not have the same thing for cyber risk because it doesn't work that way. It depends on the size of the company. There's so many more variables and different ways that it's being handled and how many incidents are covered up. So we have a real hard time quantizing the risk properly in a way that makes sense to management, to properly buy cyber insurance, to properly price risk, to properly prioritize risk. It's very difficult, but we have to do it. So we measure and quantize it the best we know how. And then based on that, we can do various things with that risk. Next slide. We can accept, avoid, transfer, or reduce. Now, these are all different types of risk mitigation. There's different names for them, but these are pretty straightforward. And it depends on the cost. What is the recommended way to suggest a cybersecurity budget for the bean counters? Ian, thank you. That's a great question. Although we don't call them bean counters. We call them accountants and pains in our, never mind. I'm kidding. All right. So honestly, there's a great way to do the cybersecurity budget. And I'm going to do it in dollars just because that's how I know it, and percentages. Effectively, you take your annual running revenue. So let's say your company makes, let's do round numbers, $1 million a year in revenue, okay, ARR. About 7 to 12% of that should be your IT budget, okay? So if your company makes $1 million in running revenue, you're probably talking about 100,000. Let's make it 10%, nice round numbers. $100,000 of that million should be your IT budget, okay? Whatever your IT budget is, now we're talking $100,000, about 4 to 7% of that, and I bias towards the high end, but whatever, should not coming out of that 100,000 on top of, but we use this as our metric, 4 to 7% of your IT budget should be your security budget. So in this case, that would only be about 10%, let's say, is $10,000, so $7,000 or so. Don't get me wrong, this is ridiculous. This is a tiny company. $1 million a year can only support, 5 or 7 people. Especially after costs, you're probably only supporting 3 people working there. Okay. So think about $100 million company, and $100 million company, let's add a 0 to everything we just said. Your IT budget is $1 million a year. And then on top of that, your IT security budget is roughly 7% of that. So 7% of $1 million is 70,000. So for a $100 million company, you've basically got one person and the tools to support them, but that's on top of IT. And remember what I said about, in my opinion, and this is really anecdotal, please forgive me for rough numbers, but about 80% of security is actually good IT, good system administration. So realistically, again, they should be symbiotic. Okay, they should work together. And that $1 million that you're taking for, wait, did I say 100 million? So 10% is 10 million. I'm an idiot. Forgive me. Doing math in my head, not my strongest suit. 10 million is your IT budget. 10% of that would be $1 million. 7% of that would be 700,000. So 700,000 for a $100 million company would be your security budget, which would support about 4 to 5 people plus a nice raft of tools and various things they can play with. So Ian, does that, oh, wonderful. Thanks very much. Okay, lovely. I'm glad you like that, Ian. Thank you. Now, there are some great articles, by the way. I would strongly recommend doing some research. I'm trying to remember who wrote it. There was a great article. I didn't come prepared for budget questions. My apologies, Ian. There's a great article about a guy that actually studied the budgets of various companies and how well they weather cyber attacks based on the budgets that they provide. And he studied some of the biggest JP Morgan Chase and Vanguard, a lot of different companies, and said, okay, based on these budgets and the how they work together and how well they weather a cyber attack, you should be doing these percentages. And I cribbed my numbers from his. Okay, let's be clear, but you should really go back to primary source. There's also and I'm going to go a little off topic here, Ian, I apologize. There's a fascinating set of studies that were done, full scientific studies, about the chain of command for a cybersecurity organization and for an audit organization. And it is absolutely fascinating that who they report to massively changes their effectiveness and efficiency. Massively. I cannot say this enough times. Who you as an audit or as a cybersecurity or as an IT person report to and who your department reports to is incredibly important in how effective you are. Which it's like, well, shouldn't we be able to do our job no matter what? If the security people and the audit people report to the CFO, directly to the CEO, or directly to a steering committee on the board, they're about, if I remember correctly, 2 to 4 times as effective as somebody that reports to a CISO. Weird.
Or CIO.
Or CIO, rather, excuse me.
Yeah.
Very, very strange. But apparently it's very important to get past some gatekeepers effectively.
Well,
anyway,
Josh, it all comes
again,
down to, it all comes down to how much risk and what are you willing to do with that risk inside of the organization, right?
Of course.
When you're talking budget numbers and you're talking org charts and you're talking about process and procedures, right? It all comes down to mitigation and what you do to move your risk, right? The acceptance, the avoidance, the transfer, or the reduction, right? All of that is planned around it. And most companies can't get past how to deal with that, right? So when dealing with risk, right, there's really 2 types of risk, right? There's positive risk and there's negative risk, right? The positive risk is the risk that you take to advance your business, right? To advance the product line, to advance your widget, right? Whatever you're selling, right? The negative risk is the risk that is detrimental to the organization, right? So let's talk about this in financial terms, right? If you go to the bank and you say, "Hey, bank, I need to take out a $10 million loan," right? Bank says, "Great. What are you going to do with it?" And you say, "I've got this plan. I'm going to use it on XYZ. It's going to be spent over a set amount of time," right? It's basically a financial model behind the loan pool, right? Bank's going to say, "Sure." Right? What are you doing with that money when it comes into the org? Are you sticking to the plan, or are you having to deal with black swan events where you're spending that money and it wasn't budgeted for, right?
Black swan events, those never happen. I mean, it's not like we
Yeah.
get hurricanes and pandemics. Gosh,
Yeah.
some people.
So how do you ensure that risk stays positive for your organization, right? And how do you understand what the drivers are that can put that risk into a negative posture for the organization, right? How do you stay ahead of those and walk around them? Go ahead, Josh.
Let's be clear. We're not saying that don't take risk. As a business and as a business person, you have to take risks. Everything you do is a risk. There's a lot of financial institutions that say, "Oh, it's too risky of an environment. We're just going to shut up shop. We're going to close up shop." And it's like, that's great, but now you're not doing anything to help reduce the problem. Now you're not doing anything to fix the problem. You're just, turtling up and we're done. So, and I'm not saying take undue risks either. We're not saying, "Oh, go out and spend money like it's candy." No. What we're saying is take cautious, careful, calculated risks. Okay. You want your risks to be on the positive side. I want to win that bet every time. I want to come out of this with, we won. Okay.
Mhm.
But yeah, you're going to lose some. It's the way it goes. I've closed up companies before. Scott's left companies. We've been there when the risks came back. Snake eyes came back badly. But if you don't take risk, you don't get a reward. What we're saying is digital hygiene and doing the fundamentals is how you reduce the undue aspects of risk, how you reduce the possibility of negative repercussions of risk. Okay. Exactly. Opportunity versus liabilities. Thank you, Cedric. Well said.
So the risk of a digital hygiene initiative is the effort and or cost involved performing it versus the positive outcome of the following, right? Reduction of sales friction, increasing of security posture. So how can you take what you're doing in the business and what kind of risk you're seeing in the business and then transform that into a positive outcome for the business itself, right? What we see when we're working with companies most of the time is that companies take a very adverse look towards IT, right? They look at IT as a cost center, not a profit center. And they don't want to understand that profit center is so key to the rest of the business, right? That they shove most IT orgs into the corner. Go ahead, Josh.
No, you're absolutely correct. And when IT is only concerned with IT and security is only concerned with security, and that's so not true. We do security and compliance at Redline, okay? And we often ask, "Can we talk to your sales and marketing departments?" And they're like, "Why? They don't know."
Yeah, we hired you for a very specific job. Why do you want to talk with them?
And we're like, "Hey, would you like to make more sales?" "Well, yeah." "Okay, good, because we need to increase your budget." And in line with the budgetary numbers that we just talked about, thank you, Ian, if we increase your running revenue, you get to increase your IT and your security budget. So let us help you do that as well. I'm like, "Well, how?" We're like, "Okay, hang on." And we go talk to the marketers. And we're like, "Hey, we've just gotten you certified in X, and we've gotten you safer in Y, and we've done this and that and the other thing. Can you use that to point out to your potential clients and prospects that you're better than the rest?" "Oh my God, yes, this is awesome. Thank you. Nobody from security has ever talked to us before." "Okay." "Oh, we've reduced the sales friction, so your sales now made in half the time." "Okay. Is that helpful?" "Well, hell yeah. I mean, that's amazing." "Okay, good." So the point is that if we can help your sales get bigger and help your marketing get more effective, we get more of a budget to play with. Life is good.
Yeah. So, we're not all Thundercats. We're not going to get this done correctly all the time. I had to make an 80s reference here, I mean, we get it,
You see
it's
what I
not
deal with here? You see what I deal with here every day?
We don't all, we can't all throw a sword at the problem and call it a day, right? But when dealing with compliance and digital hygiene, right, we believe that there are three things that drive everything an IT shop does inside a business, right? And you totally welcome to fight us on this, right? In fact, we would enjoy it. But let's save those questions for the end. We believe that the policies, the procedures, and the technical control implementation are what drives compliance, right? If you drive compliance, then you can drive the budget for security, right? What's wrong, Josh?
The picture, never mind. I'm just not going there.
Right.
All right.
So, a well-crafted set of policies and procedures really help take the grand vision from the top down and place it into the org.
You've got a standard, a set of standards. You've got a way that we do business. And when you do that properly, it goes from top to bottom. And it flows into your confidentiality, integrity, availability. It flows into how we do business. It flows into our mindset. It flows into everything. And it's a good thing. All right. So effectively, we've gone through, next slide. We've gone through a lot of what digital hygiene is and what cyber hygiene is, what sort of defined it and why it matters, as it will. We wanted to talk about one potential way of doing some of these things in ways that make your lives easier. And so we decided to talk about automation, okay? And automating a lot of your digital hygiene and cyber hygiene is one of the ways that we're seeing massive amounts of change in this world of ours in security and compliance, and happen very, very fast. I mean, let me ask you, and please throw it in the chat. How many of you have used any kind of config management automation tools in the past, say, 6 months or a year, or change management automation, patch management automation? And I'd be willing to bet it's most everybody that's here now, and I'd be willing to bet it's most everybody that's actually going to watch this later on down the road. So if you have used HashiCorp, if you've used SCCM, if you've used WSUS, if you've used any of the Salt Stack, Chef, Puppet, Ansible, I'm braining bad today, forgive me. Any of those, throw a note in the chat. I'm really curious which ones you've used and which ones you can think of that you've played with, used in your enterprise. I'm kind of curious. It's a constant ongoing survey we do. But, automation in itself is a huge, huge piece. And so what we want to do is talk about automation very, very quickly. We're going to skim this. We've only got about 15 minutes left, so we're going to skim this pretty quickly, even though we started writing this and it was like, wow, we have a lot of stuff here. So let's roll through this really, really quickly. Next slide, and leave some time for questions. Look, automation is the process of taking a person away from something and giving it to a machine. Simple as that. There's something interesting. Scott, you had a great explanation for this. Go for it.
So there's a marketplace out there called SOAR, right? SOAR, right? SOAR is, what is that, Josh? Security, orchestration, automation, and
response.
Okay. So,
which we disagree with, by the way.
We do. We totally disagree with this. This is as defined by Gartner themselves, right? So it refers to technologies that enable organizations to collect inputs and monitor inputs monitored by the security operations team, right? There's a lot of companies that are in this market space that are geared towards incident response. They're geared towards providing high-level automation of other things than security, right? And we have a problem with this, right? So in talking about SOAR, we've really come up with what it really should be, which is security and compliance orchestration, automation, response, and risk evaluation, right? or scories.
Score.
Okay.
Think of it as the, when they're playing
Oh no,
football
don't go
in
there.
Italy, score.
You, my friend, need help. You
I
in
work with
sports
you.
ball. You in sports ball. Okay. So talking about SCORE really should be CORE, right? Compliance, orchestration, automation, and risk evaluation, right? The compliance orchestration part is so difficult for a lot of companies. It should be automated, right, as best as possible. But the problem is that nobody's really like taking a hard look at absolutely everything that's going on inside of a business. There are products out there that do compliance automation, right? But those products only look at very select areas that they can auto link into, right, where everybody else is already doing the work, and then pull the data from that, right? So types of security automation, right? Speaking about this, purchase point products versus purchase integrative systems, right? There are point products. There are point products out there that do vulnerability scanning. They do event correlation. I think we can name a couple of those right off the top of our head. Incident management and playbooks, right? Third-party assessments, right? But when dealing with the automation aspect of this, right, it's very easy to lose sight of companies that are out there and what they're doing. Okay. But why is it so important? Right? Why is automation so important? Right? The problem that we're seeing, right, is that there is a skills gap, and I think everybody can agree on that, right? And to deal with that skills gap, companies now are moving towards automated processes where they can force multiply what's going on inside of their security organization, right? They say automation will reduce cost, right? No, because you have to understand the amount of work that needs to go into the process, procedure, and control implementation, right? To be able to capitalize on the ROI of automated systems, right? So the security tech market in general is in a state of overload with pressure on budgets, staff shortages, too many point solutions, right? And as a general practice, a lot of companies are looking at SOAR to be the primary vehicle for the automation of things, right? So let's talk about this pressure on budgets, right? How many of you have had a budget this year, not even last year, this year? How many of you have had your budget slashed? Right?
I bet significant numbers of you. Some companies are seeing massive growth, but a lot of companies are, even with growth, they're seeing budget slashing in preparation for, we don't know what's going to happen.
Yep.
I mean, right now here in the US, Pennsylvania, the next state over from me, I'm literally 15 minutes from it, is about to do a full-on lockdown beyond what they did at the beginning of the pandemic. I won't get into politics, but yeah, it's necessary.
And then, Josh, do you want to talk about staff shortages?
So I hate this because staff shortages are true and not true. There's a lot of people that have come up in the hacker and IT security world with no college degree that are incredibly competent and wonderful people. There's a lot of people that have come up in the IT world and IT security world with a college degree that are worse than useless, and vice versa. The staff shortage is because we don't have people that are certified for the companies that have an HR filter of certification, but are capable of doing the work. Mm-hmm. And we have too many people with certifications that are not capable of doing the work. And it drives me nuts.
Can't even spell the certification they have.
I literally have had people with more certifications than letters in their name ask me how to tell when a script begins in a web page. And I'm like, you see the thing that says caret script end caret, and then at the bottom of it, it says caret / script end caret. Like, oh, is that how you tell? I'm like, you've got everything. How do you not know this? And it's because they didn't come up learning IT. They just went straight into IT security, and that's fine, but it limits you to a certain extent. Anyway, So yes, there are staff shortages because we don't have the right people in the right place or an idea of how to tell who's the right person. It's a problem. Sorry, go ahead, Scott. Point solutions.
No,
Okay.
no, go ahead.
No, so we have staff shortages, we have point solutions overloading us, and we have too many things going on at the same time. There's an old saying: it's incredibly hard to drain the swamp when you're up to your ass in alligators. We're firefighting all the time. Planning ahead, good luck. And there's these two guys up here from Red Lion with fancy backgrounds going, you should plan things and have process. And the answer is, yeah, you have to, because if you don't, you're going to be up to your butt in alligators, and it's going to be a real problem.
Yeah, and that process, Josh, to talk about that for a quick second, that process, it doesn't matter whether you're a small business or you're a large enterprise. Absolutely everything needs to be driven by PM-based processes, right? Project management-based processes. From when you're starting out to a large enterprise, it doesn't matter. If you're not looping in PMs for what you are doing, are you doing it correctly? Are you making sure that you're being granular enough with all of the steps that you need to hit, all of the people that you need to interface with, all of the stakeholders you need to gain confidence from, right? Are you doing this the right way, right? But a lot of that comes down to maturity, right? Again, remember earlier we were talking about the ability to understand when you need to bring in a PM and get a process behind something, right? So if try the quick test that we have here, right? Or do it rhetorically, right? Ultimately, this is what we feel, right? You're not mature. Go ahead, Josh.
I mean, it's sort of a joke. If there's a point solution and then they go, great, buy it. You're not mature, because how does that point solution integrate with all of our other tools?
Mm-hmm.
How many tabs do I need to have open on my browser to have all of the point solutions open so that I can jump between 14 of them and see, maybe I think I can narrow it down, but give me 20 more hours because I've got 14 different sets of tool results to go through. Oh, dear God, kill me now. Okay. It's insane. And every time you buy a point product, every single time, you spend more time integrating it into the workflows and solution sets that you have now than you would and if you almost built your own integration from it. Okay. It's not fun.
So by doing that, Josh, are you actually doing digital hygiene?
I mean, in one sense, you're buying a solution. In another sense, you're overloading the people you have now. So yeah, unless you want to buy a solution and a person to go along with it, you're not really performing digital hygiene.
Right. And if that's the case, do you actually understand the spend, the TCO, if you will, the total cost of ownership?
Oh, hell no. Sorry, but I mean, come on. If you buy a product and they say, oh, it's only going to be, $150,000, and you're like, great, that's wonderful, that's in the budget. And you're like, well, the question you must ask is, how many people is it going to take to manage it? How many people is it going to take to handle the information that we get out of it? How many people is it going to take to run the problems down or implement the solution? And if the answer isn't, you've already got them, you're good, then it's a much higher cost that you have not accounted for.
So Josh, why is it so important?
Okay, you want to feed me that kind of softball? That's
I want to, dude. I want to throw you a softball. I want to throw you something that you can knock out of the park.
All right. So here's the deal. Automation is important because, any of those folks take vacations, you have to cover somehow. So it's not one person, it's three. Because remember, if you're doing 24/7, it's actually a minimum of 6. I think I figured out. Okay. Because you need 1 or 2 people on each shift. You have 3 shifts. You need somebody to take when they're on vacation. You have weekends, all that. It's not fun. Okay, everybody. Well said, Ian. Thank you. So, people are expensive. I think if you take a look at your budget, some of your highest costs are for your personnel. If you automate, you might not have to buy that extra person. You might not have to hire that extra person. If you can get filtration, proper filtration, pulling the wheat from the chaff, if you will, all right, and orchestration to help you understand and orchestrate through your responses, you get a much better idea of how your plans are working, the ramifications and repercussions of your plan, the decision points that are actually important versus seem important because of urgency, and what the positive and negative risks are and how to steer towards always the positive. Okay. Next slide.
So if SOAR is done properly, it saves money, time, and effort, right? But the the definition of properly varies from one person to the next, right? Automation is amazing. It's not new, right? But it's growing at an astounding rate, right?
A system administrator, by the way, the definition of a system administrator is the person the third time they do something that takes them 10 minutes, they'll spend 40 hours to automate it. Okay. I mean, this is what we're talking about. Automation is not new. It's been done for, oh dear God, decades and decades and decades. But if you do automation properly, it makes your life a lot easier and allows you to focus on longer term initiatives rather than what's right in front of your face. By the way, there's an Easter egg on that slide. There is no such thing as pizza ops, but I had to throw it in there just because. All right.
So that's the end of that. But let's go back just for 1 second, right? Let's talk about this just a little bit more, right? Unfortunately, with the SOAR market, right, as it's being defined today, right, there is a high barrier to entry, right? And that barrier comes in the form of multiple ways, right? Either you have the process and procedure already in place to capitalize on a SOAR product, right? Or you can spend to get there, right? But you variance that against the cost of the SOAR products that are in market now, right? There are companies out there that are saying, well, you need to give us $100,000 just to get access to the product, not even to install it or configure it or help you capitalize on the ROI. 100,000, you must be this tall or ride this ride. There are other products inside of the SOAR market that are geared specifically for businesses to have a revenue driver, right? So a company inside of the SOAR market, and I'm not going to say which, will sell you a incident response and forensics product just so that they can sell you ProServe, right? Just so that they can be out there saying, hey, we're doing our best when you have an incident. We're going to come in and clean it all up for you, right? I mean, that's all the product is, right? It's going to go in and do the first round of triage and start gathering artifacts towards the incident just so that they can come in and charge you more money. So when you're dealing, go ahead, Josh.
There are good companies and bad companies that do incident response, that do orchestration, that do various things. I went through Mach 37, which was an accelerator with a gentleman named JP Bourget, and he had an orchestration product called Syncurity. Absolutely fantastic. It basically built playbooks for if you lost a laptop, what do we do type of thing. And great guy. Okay. And great product. And they just got acquired by Swimlane, I think. But, but it's not cheap. None of this stuff is cheap. And you've got to figure out how to make it work with your processes, your systems, your enterprise, your environment. And, you know, there's always the customization costs. Okay. So be careful of those. But effectively, the next wave of the future that we're going to see over the next 2 to 5 years is automation and orchestration of all of our point products or all of the products that they have in their product, in their automation orchestration product. It's going to be a big, big market. And as a matter of fact, like I said, we're working on a product that's effectively in that market. We think it's because we got interested and because we got annoyed. It's because we walked into Fortune 1000 companies and said, well, how many assets do you have? And like, we don't know. It's like, how do you not know? And because of the annoyance factor of having to deal with this literally all the time, I can't even tell you, like all the time, we built a product around that kind of thing, around cyber hygiene. So anyway, I will shut up. And Holly, I think we maybe have some questions or how are you doing?
That was amazing. Well, thank you, though. For both of you, there's loads of incredibly useful information in there for anyone's looking to take the right steps. So I know we've had some questions sort of throughout that have been answered, but does anyone have any more questions?
While people are churning up questions, you know, Josh and I give presentations all the time, right? We go to conferences back when this wasn't pandemic, right? A lot, right? We are heavily involved in conference work, right? What we don't appreciate is when somebody comes up on stage and starts spitting fear, uncertainty, and doubt or FUD, right?
Right.
Or stuff that we've said, oh, well, these 20 other people have also said the exact same thing. Great for you. You can public speak, right? What we're trying to say here is that shedding the light on the basics of doing security, a lot of companies have a real issue with, right? Either they're lost in the weeds, they don't have the right personnel, they don't have the correct structure from on high, or the budget just isn't there, right? So the real question is, how do you hit the center of a moving Venn diagram of that, right? And that's what we're trying to present about here, right? So let's see here.
As well, let's be honest, a lot of people want to be, look how cool I am. Now, original research is incredibly cool. I am like on board with that. I love original research. But, they're like, oh, you're talking about simple stuff. Why do I care? Well, because it's important. Because if you don't get the simple stuff right, the foundational elements right, you can't get anything right. You can be the best pen tester in the world, but if you don't document your findings, you're not getting paid. It may not be sexy to talk about documentation of your findings, but it's kind of important. Okay. So we like to talk about things that are foundational and things that are important to all the people around.
Brilliant. I think it's been very insightful for everyone. I don't think we have any more questions. So are you two ready to finish up?
Yeah,
Sure.
no, we definitely want to give a big thank you to both you, Holly, and Adam, as well as West Point, for putting this together and allowing us to come and pontificate on Thanksgiving, right? So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for coming and obviously taking some time off when it is Thanksgiving. I hope you can go, both go enjoy the rest of your days now.
Definitely, not a problem. Thank you.
Well, brilliant. So, thank you for your time, and thank you everyone for coming, and everyone who's watching this later as well. We'll be sending the full recording out as well as soon as we can, for you to like, share, and rewatch, as many times as you'd like, as well as a link to our next event, which will be next week. I think it's actually the week after, with Alex Hutchinson from Spectre, who'll be talking about EDR. And in the meantime, I hope everyone has a lovely rest of the day and a better weekend. See you later.
Thank you all.
Thank you.